All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Morning. Still morning.
Morning. Oh, good Lord, it's got to be afternoon someplace. And I want to encourage everybody to kind of maybe get a little closer. This is a session that we would love to be interactive, and we'd love for you guys to just jump in. And I think the closer everybody is, the less friction there is to be able to say something.
Jason's our guinea pig.
Oh boy, I didn't mean that literally. I was just saying that, Jason. we could. All right. So this session is one where we appreciate everybody sticking with it, and we know that there is a ton of content at Groceryshop, and so there's sort of a need to help summarize, synthesize it all. I also realize that there's a possibility that some of you may be emerging from a 3-day Las Vegas style bender, and might not have been able to absorb all of the content. And so we wanted to sort of summarize all of that. So again, we really want everybody engaged. Please dive in with thoughts, disagreements. At about 11:40, we will try to encourage everybody to give us feedback. And any thoughts about what you liked, what you'd like to see more of, less of. We're definitely going to try to wring that out of you. So start thinking about that sort of thing now so that we don't have too much uncomfortable silence when 11:40 rolls around. We're going to start though, so we've really got this broken down into 5 hunks. The first is Joe and Krystina are going to summarize some of what came out of our emerging tech spotlight content to just kind of give you some key takeaways there for those that weren't able to make that session. Then we're going to talk about operational excellence and some of the things that we've heard, some of the themes that have come up. Then we're going to talk about cultivating an innovative culture, so cultural type issues, the future of brands, and then we're going to talk about the where the consumer experience is going and some of the things we've heard about that. So I will start off passing the baton to Joe.
Yeah, sure. Fantastic. Thanks, Ken. Glad to be on stage with you for this recap of the event. So for those of you who don't know the Emerging Technology Spotlight, this was a new session format that we tried on Sunday. All of the Sunday afternoon track 4 was taken up with this set of rapid-fire presentations by very early-stage technology companies. By and large, these companies were under 4 years old. They're all before their Series A round of funding. And we kind of really used that session to show the audience kind of some of what's next, some of what young from a company standpoint, not necessarily from an age standpoint, entrepreneurs are creating to kind of help the grocery and CPG industries evolve. So the picture on screen is almost all 20 of the presenters, and Deborah Weinswig, who emceed, and I'm off to one side as I should be. And I guess what I wanted to say about the companies is, we look for a diverse range of different solutions, but every year, sort of the applicants that we get and the stories, the proposals that seem most interesting to the audience do tend to fall into certain key categories. And so this year it was really interesting to me that we had a relatively large number of presenters that were focused on the in-store experience, innovations around in-store, making in-store more measurable, kind of the way that the digital media are measurable, making in-store experiences more interactive for the consumer. So it's sort of like, kind of taking e-commerce capabilities and moving them to the physical store was one big trend that we saw. There were a number of companies that fell into kind of operations and supply chain, and that doesn't always happen, but a couple of companies around like warehouse and DC management and trucking, shipping, and fulfillment type solutions as well. The third category focused on marketing and just kind of reaching the customer in new and innovative ways. And then the fourth category, I would say, were companies focused on data and data analytics. And so, like I say, every year, kind of the way that your early stage tech company track breaks down is a little different, but I would say, in-store experience, data, marketing, and operations in the supply chain were the 4 topics that seem to gravitate to the top in terms of there's a number of bright people starting companies in those spaces. If we go forward the last thing I'll say about that is, while this is not a competition, we did include some audience interactivity in this track as well. So after each brief presentation. We let the audience just vote, rate each company that presented on a scale from 1 to 5. And the 5 companies in alphabetical order, not in voting order, that gravitated to the top. One makes autonomous drones that go in warehouses to track inventory. One made a meal kit technology solution so that grocers can make their own meal kits in-house and offer them to customers. One was an in-store GPS replacement type solution, doing location tracking through a very, very clever technology that requires no infrastructure. And then the last two, one makes item onboarding much easier and faster, and one makes shopper marketing much more logical with fewer complicated Excel spreadsheets. So like I say, a very broad range of different sorts of solutions, and I think it's exciting to me that so many new companies are springing up to help innovate around grocery challenges. Do you want to talk a little bit about disruptive?
Yes, I feel like you're making me look bad though, because I do not have any pretty slides. But we also similarly try to highlight companies who are a little bit farther along in their funding. I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule there, behind how mature the company is. Obviously, the company's shows featuring are typically earlier stage, really sort of at the very early stages of their company. Typically don't have clients, or if they do, they have very few clients. And I tend to look at companies who are, maybe around Series A. Have some viable customers, those sorts of things. And I think a lot of the same trends that Joe was just talking about, we hit on. So we certainly had a session on the intelligence store. We had a session on AI in operations, AI in marketing. And I think when I look at the companies that I want to feature on those sessions, I take a really hard look at companies that are all solving a similar problem in very different ways, right? So we had, for example, a session on mobile and e-commerce. And obviously there are a million different ways that you can interpret that. So instead of having, two companies who are approaching that in a very similar way. We had Cargo, who's looking more at, okay, you can use your mobile app to order while you're in an Uber, and it's sort of a new distribution channel for CPG companies. And then, we would have a company like Smart Commerce speaking on the same session, where she's talking more about, some innovative like click-to-cart technology, right, where you're making it easier for the customer if they see your ad on social media, if they see it on a website, just very simply take all the friction out. I think she had some really interesting things to say about some of the counterintuitive nature of shoppers who are shopping for CPG products online, and that they tend to not be as focused on price as you might think that they are. They tend to want you to make the decision for them in terms of the pack size, in terms of the flavor. So really, I think what she brought to that conversation, which I really took away, was the more help you can give people who are looking to buy your products online, the better.
All right. Excellent. And so the next hunk that we want to talk about, segment.
We'll also get your feedback on the use of the word hunk.
Yeah.
It was hot debate among us.
I've been told that I overuse the term hunk. Joe and I are often referred to as the content hunks. But operational efficiency. I think this is a video.
I love it. Supply chain of the future for alcohol.
So I'm actually, I guess I'll go back to this slide. So around operational efficiency, we heard over the course, and by the way, as we went through the sessions, I had the benefit of being able to go to a lot of the sessions. Our research associates, Lily and Henry, were able to attend a lot of the sessions as well. And as we were filtering through notes over the past couple of days, I heard, basically probably 10 different times some version of strategy is the easy part, execution is where the rubber hits the road. And so some interesting conversations, some interesting kind of meta observations. The evolution of build versus buy is evolving. And what we're increasingly starting to see is traditional companies, whether they're brands or retailers, getting more and more comfortable with the idea of partnering with others in order to accelerate their technology development. I can think of one example of a company that a traditional retailer that was really sort of heavy into building their own, still Walmart, but Walmart is really trying to redefine itself as a technology company. The other thing that we're seeing though is that digitally native companies are doubling down on their own internal development and increasingly turning those into platforms for others. And so a company that might have started as a meal kit company with the idea of selling meal kits evolves toward a meal kit platform for others. Ocado is a great example. Starts as a retailer, evolves toward a platform. Kroger says that that if they were to try to develop what they've done with Ocado, it would have taken them an extra 5 to 10 years. Another big theme, obviously, we heard a lot about automation, and there's a lot of conversation in kind of the public press about the impact on jobs and such. Here, the conversation was interesting in that, I feel like this year it really kind of evolved toward a conversation more about kind of a harmonization of machines and people, and kind of amplifying the power of people. And so I feel like the conversation is starting to move into one that's a little bit more palatable for the general public. And we have a lot of historical references of automation changes hitting industries that where we thought it was going to ruin things because jobs went away. Chainsaws created the housing industry, while log cutters might have transitioned. Spreadsheets didn't put accountants out of business. I feel like I've become more optimistic over the past year or so, and it was kind of amplified at this event, that the automation that we're seeing in warehouses and stores is going to lead to improved quality of life. We just haven't figured out exactly what it's going to look like. But I understand that it's scary if you're a retail employee, if you're a worker. But I'm becoming more optimistic that there's a happy place.
I think too, to that point, we're seeing Amazon investing in upskilling of their workers, and I think Amazon is sort of, I would equate them a little bit to how everyone always looks to what Walmart's doing and then is a fast follower. So I think that's going to have ripple effects across the industry as well. More companies are going to be looking to upskill their workers with these new technologies.
Yeah, sure. And I feel like almost all of the companies that I've heard from that are kind of talking about like in-store robotics are kind of very, I think they're very credibly saying that it's not about kind of firing half of their in-store workforce. It's about kind of allowing those workforces to do things that are more people-facing, kind of helping shoppers, as opposed to just checking stock of items on shelves and things like that. And it's funny, I just had a conversation earlier this morning around marketing. While marketing is not about like robotics or kind of physical automation, it is definitely about computerization, and there too, kind of all three of my panelists were very in agreement that while you do have digital advertising more and more being bought and sold by computers, the human aspect, kind of making an ad, making a piece of creative that really resonates with the people who are seeing it, that's still something that humans are very much needed to do. And so again, it's about kind of what letting people do what they do best by taking some of the grunt work out of the equation.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I feel like if there's a bleak future for any particular kind of worker, it's really unpleasant people. So the really unpleasant retail employee that you run into, I don't think there's any degree of automation that's going to help them out. But if you're a nice person and you're friendly to people, I think you're going to be in a good place.
I think just going back to the warehouse side, I think it was Luke Jensen from Ocado who showed the unemployment rate and how it's very hard to fill these jobs, and I certainly agree with that. But one thing that I always like to point out to people is the unemployment rate is different than the underemployment rate. So that's just something, a little caveat to keep in mind when you are looking at numbers like that.
AI, obviously we heard a lot about AI. The retailers are certainly leading the way when it comes to AI, just because of the logistics issues that they deal with. A couple of fun data points that had jumped out to me. Ocado, 20 million forecasts per day. Schnucks, 230 digital IoT sensors in their measuring their temperature zones. Was interesting. Food waste certainly falls into operational excellence, although it also falls into kind of the future of brands. But AI is obviously a critical part of managing inventory. The 40% of food lost wasted is a term is a stat that I've heard a lot. Ocado had it's interesting stats. 2.5% of sales across grocery retailers are lost to food waste, and this is in businesses that probably have about 2% or so margins. Ocado at 0.7% of their sales. So it's I feel like e-commerce over the years has been in many ways justifiably beaten up as we get giant boxes delivered by UPS with a $12 box of Cascade pods. But this I think does show with improved inventory turnover management that e-commerce can be not just a part of the problem on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think around food waste, it was one of the things that Krystina and I mentioned as far as kind of a key trend as well in kind of looking at the zeitgeist of retail. And I think that the good news there are so many different kinds of technology solutions that aim to address the food waste issue. I think the flip side of that though is when you look more closely at that 40% of food is wasted stat. Grocery retail and kind of the supply chain is relatively speaking a smaller percentage of that problem than just consumer waste. And so I think to really address it involves not just the industry doing more, but also doing more to educate the customer and kind of help them not overbuy or kind of plan better or things like that as well.
And we saw some good examples of that with the expiration dates, when you're placing your order. I think, was it Boxed that was talking about that? Okay, if you place this order now, it's going to expire by X date. And that sort of helps you as a consumer think, oh, wait, am I actually going to have time to eat this before it expires? So that's a clever way, I think, of getting the consumer more involved in solving the problem.
Definitely. Yeah, and just forecasting demand is clearly an AI-related part of that. Shelf Engine was on the disruptive technology track, and they're just one of many companies that aims to help retailers kind of project exactly how many rolls they're going to sell or tomatoes they're going to sell so that they don't overstock items.
And I think what's interesting about them too, and one of the things that they pointed out in their presentation, is it's not always just about how much you're ordering. It goes down to everything going back to the planogram. If you have this gigantic space where you're keeping oranges and you're never going to turn through all those, you're basically just setting yourself up each and every time that you reorder to have additional waste. But what you really should be looking at is maybe even going and taking a step back, correcting the planogram, and moving on from there.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to culture. Nope, no more. So the quote here that was cited at least once. Somebody will tell me who it was. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Anyone? Peter Drucker, thank you, Zia. And so obviously culture is really one of the most critical, difficult to see, but most important things in kind of managing the evolution that technology is bringing to the retail.
Wait. So in the visual is Pac-Man culture and the ghosts are strategy?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't understand it at first, but now I do.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, Jeff. Another quote that I liked, Seth Goldman quoted, I think this was some proverb, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt the people that are doing it. I like that a lot. Wayne from Constellation Brands talked about the idea that in 10 years, the e-commerce team, which he currently heads up at Constellation Brands, really should not exist, that it's something that increasingly needs to become a part of the culture. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of organizations. A lot depends on the maturity, the digital maturity of those organizations. As I'd mentioned before, the idea of build versus buy is an important part of that. The idea of making acquisitions and figuring out how to integrate integrate people, the companies that you acquire into your company, and to figure out how to make that work well. It's pretty clear to me that is a core competency now for a big traditional brand. The founders of Harry's, for example, now head up U.S. brands for Edgewell, and And that is, I think that is a big move forward.
Yeah, just to kind of jump on that, right? I think it's important to note that there's a lot of wrong ways to do it, but there's no one right way to do that either, right? I mean, I think some companies are very successful kind of acquiring an innovative new brand or technology and kind of fully folding it into the organization. But sometimes it's also a success path to keep that sort of separate, but use it as the hub of the innovation center of the organization too. Yep. So, but it does need to be thought out. You can't just kind of make the acquisition and assume it's all going to work out. There definitely needs to be a very clearly thought out strategy.
Yep. The quick wins, this is something that I feel like I've heard a lot, but I heard a lot of it here as well. The idea of people that are coming in, that are taking over new organizations, the strategy is always kind of quick, relatively easy wins in order to gain momentum, get the dominoes kind of falling in order to give you leeway for the more challenging things that you want to do. The lot of interesting discussions on Zia's panel yesterday with digitally native brands, as well as throughout, about the ability of traditional brands to really kind of get their culture to the point where they'll be able to keep up with digitally native brands. Lauren Jupiter, when I was interviewing her for the digitally native research, a piece of research that I had done, talked about just the whacked risk-reward equation at traditional brands, where there's so much more for an individual to lose if they lose a few $1 million than there is for them to gain if they make a few extra $1 million. And on Zia's panel, I think that the 2/3 of the folks felt that that traditional brands couldn't replicate what digitally native brands were doing. One felt that they could, and you guys have probably picked up on a lot of those conversations as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like that's one of the topics. It's sort of like micro-fulfillment or gigantic fulfillment centers. It's like one of those battles that seems to be coming up in a lot of sessions. And I know a conversation that I had on Sunday with Karen Short of Barclays, I had asked her, are you concerned, or should grocery retailers be concerned about brands taking more power in grocery as they have in traditional retail? And she didn't think that was a concern for them at this current moment in time. I think what she really pointed to was the supply chain issues and how difficult it would be, for these guys to deliver direct. But I certainly can understand where she's coming from, but I'm always quick to not dismiss an idea like that. I personally don't see any reason why brands couldn't take more power. I'm sure a lot of people had that opinion about the Nikes of the world a couple of years ago, and now their direct business is just soaring, whether it's online, whether it's pop-up stores. Joe was talking in our presentation about the Kellogg store, and I think that's a fantastic example, especially for a brand like that consumers love. I mean, people go bananas about that store in New York. It's been there forever, and people just get really excited. They want to interact with the brand. They want to experience the brand. So I don't see any reason why there couldn't be more of that going forward.
Yeah, I've always thought that it was more the free air conditioning and Wi-Fi that drove people into the store. But
I think the session that I moderated around working with startups kind of touched on some of that too, right? Gulrez Aurora, who runs the 2 accelerator programs at Mars Wrigley these days, kind of talked specifically about, they reach out to young startups on the technology side to kind of solve specific problems that Mars knows that it's having internally. And then they've just launched a food-focused accelerator program to kind of curate and nurture food companies that are doing things around plant-based and kind of sustainable and healthy and things that maybe Mars's core food brands aren't so well known for, but that they know that they need to do. And I guess there are also examples of companies that are doing that internally, though. I mean, I point to Tyson, who, sure, they're known for chicken and whatnot, but they've just spun up a whole bunch of plant-based protein snack foods and other things under brands that are kind of distinct from Tyson's mothership brand, because they think it's important to kind of give them some space to breathe and grow on their own.
So, any comments from the audience on the topic of traditional brands and their inability to pick up the pace of evolution in order to keep up with digitally native brands? Hang on one second. Thanks, Eric.
I don't know if hi, Eric Treehub, I'm with Kimberly Clark. I sat in on one roundtable that had the CEO of Drizzly, very impressed with him and the other speakers, and I don't know if I have the answer, but I found as a very insightful nugget, he said, instead of thinking about taking a legacy traditional brand and bringing it online, flip the script and think about what a digitally native brand might look like and manifest out, kind of flip the script, work from the end backwards versus, if you will, lift and shift from a traditional brand mindset to bringing that visibility presence online.
Yeah.
I found that to be pretty insightful.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, they're doing some interesting things too. I think just giving the brands a lot of power on the Drizzly platform. I feel like that's something that we're not really seeing across the industry. You know, it's very much typically templated to how the retailer is, and I think what Drizzly is doing is really interesting in the fact that, okay, you know, this is going to be the sticking with Corona just because I see Jason and I know he likes his Coronas. But it's, you know, they're going to outfit that page to really be specific for Corona, and it'll be interesting to see if others in the industry sort of follow that approach or if the retailers remain regimented.
Right. The alcohol category is a very special case just because of the way regulation has always kind of created an arm's length distance between the brands and the retailers, but certainly Drizzly, Minibar, companies like that are kind of changing the rules of the game a little bit.
I stand, just a little side note on the Beval business. I believe that digital is going to be the thing that topples the three-tier distribution system. Definitely a niche topic that warrants probably a whole nother discussion. Future of brands. Let us see what we have for a Future of Brands video.
So if they want to call you crazy, fine. Show them what crazy can do.
I think we might have grabbed the wrong segment of that particular video, which was about social purpose, and so with social purpose, it's I think very, very interesting things have been happening around the idea of social purpose over the past year or two. Every brand, every retailer historically has had charitable causes, and we have Jimmy funds and things like that. But one thing that was when I was doing research on digitally native brands, the vast majority, something like 86% of digitally native brands, had embraced some form of social social purpose, and that was echoed by the bigger brands that were on stage as well. I can't remember who the stat came from. 70% of people want to buy conscientious brands. The 30% of people are probably friends with the one dentist that doesn't recommend sugarless gum for their patients that chew gum. The Procter & Gamble, it's 9 out of 10 people prefer brands that support causes they care about. 65% of millennials find it unacceptable for brands to be silent on social issues. And the one thing that is pretty clear to me is that I feel like the motivation for a lot of people kind of talking about social purpose issues, they kind of have millennials on the brain. In fact, I think there's a lot of strategy that's driven by people that have millennials on the brain that is actually having very, very positive spillover into non-millennials that actually share those values. Procter & Gamble talked about their feeling that they had an obligation to talk about certain social issues that could potentially invite some risk. The What It Means to Be a Man Gillette campaign is one where they basically made the statement that seems to me relatively uncontroversial that we shouldn't run around groping women, but even that created some blowback for them, but they seem comfortable with that. They seem to kind of understand. Colin Kaepernick with Nike. Fun fact, so Colin Kaepernick first took a knee on August 16th, 2016. From that date until last week when I checked the stock price, Nike's stock price was up 58% compared to the S&P up 38%. Some things that they're doing seem risky, but they've been working for them because they've been helping them connect with their customer. The thing that's become really, really clear to me is that in the past, a traditional brand, the big risk would be that their particular celebrity spokesperson wound up, on TMZ or with something embarrassing happening. I think that it's becoming abundantly clear, though, that the bigger risk for traditional brands is more of a slow degradation of personal relevancy, and social purpose as well as environmental purpose is key toward that. On environmental food waste, obviously we've heard a lot about. Everyone is just much more conscious about it. Procter & Gamble is selling suds to car washes that don't meet their manufacturing standards. Lots and lots of movement toward less plastic. Grove Collaborative, who is the CEO? Stu
Landsberg.
Made a point about environmental purpose that I thought was really interesting and was echoed in a few other places. And he had said, the people always ask me, is this just for the affluent millennials that live on the coast? And he said, our top indexing zips are Texas, Tennessee, and these, and it's not, and again, I think that we kind of have our mind on this particular consumer as a coastal millennial that represents a much broader swath of America than we think.
And just to jump in there, I think one thing that's really interesting that Stu talks about a lot is just how it's not just about being less bad; it's about being good. And I know that's something you guys have talked about.
Being more
quite a
good,
bit.
yeah. I mean, I wish I had another 20 minutes to talk with Stu, because our prep call was great. I guess this is a little opportunity to give you a little director's cut of some of the stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about on stage. But yeah, I think this idea that we all kind of have an assumption on our head of who the kind of quote unquote green sustainable consumer is, that there's actually a lot more people out there that want to do better by the environment, but maybe don't know quite how, or maybe they assume that they can't afford to do it better for the environment. And kind of it's not so much about shaming people into being better. It's really just about showing them in a positive way ways to do better.
Yeah.
and incrementally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, one more thing there. I think we talk a lot about e-commerce and kind of whether e-commerce is net better or worse than physical commerce. And I think it's sort of clear that when this is a point that Stu made, but I think it's super important when we're shipping kind of huge several gallons of liquid Tide around, that's definitely not so great for the environment. But there are ways to concentrate. There are ways to change packaging and product formulations that make them really efficient for e-commerce. It would work worse on store shelves because size matters to attract consumers' attention when they're in physical retail. But everybody from Quaker Oats to kind of the companies that Grove works with to P&G are kind of all thinking, well, when I'm selling this online, it doesn't have to be in this giant bulky package. We can find ways to make it smaller, lighter to ship, save us money, save some carbon.
Yep. Another sort of a epiphany that's kind of been bubbling is, and I've heard this. This became apparent to me as I was doing research for digitally native brands, and I heard it on stage echoed by larger brands. I believe that the future of brands is going to be toward more smaller brands from fewer larger brands. The other slice of the pie is going to get bigger. And it's, we've seen different changes in manufacturing processes over the years that have led to significant changes in markets. I think that the tech change, the ability to target marketing as we can, and the cheapness of building a world-class website right now between Shopify, AWS, and all of those tools, I think that it's creating an environment that's going to be very, very amenable to smaller brands that more personally resonate. The role of the big brand holding companies is still going to be there, but I think it's more of a curation of smaller brands than it is a focus on billion-dollar plus brands, which is something we've heard which was something we heard a lot about 3 to 5 years or so ago. Let's see. Another interesting kind of tension around brands. And actually, I'm going to keep that in the next section. I'm not going to go into that one. The marketing and advertising, obviously, we've heard a lot of people talk about how expensive social has become. We've heard people talk about increases in customer acquisition costs of 5x over the past few years. And that is pushing more and more people into television. It's interesting to me hearing how efficient television is in the eyes of some people. Also is surprised that circulars are still a subject of conversation to the extent that they are. Circulars are, they're relatively easy to beat up on. They have gotten better. They're increasingly digital. They're increasingly targeted to us. Whether it's the terrestrial version of the circular or whether it's the digital version, but it's surprising to me. I don't. 10 years ago, I don't think I would have guessed that the circular still would have been such a significant.
That's funny. Amy McClellan from Martin's Supermarket said exactly the same thing on the marketing panel. That if you'd asked her 10 years ago, she would have said, "No, we wouldn't have circulars in 10 years." But lo and behold, they still do, and they're still a very important part of their marketing mix. Because for kind of cost-sensitive customers, yeah, there's digital coupons and they work great, but there's something nice about the physical circular, seeing what's on sale, kind of the clipping and taking is kind of, it's just a nice thing for people who like to do it.
Yep.
But on the flip side to that, we also heard TikTok name dropped a couple of times throughout the event. Kroger is experimenting with them, and I know Amy from Glam Squad mentioned also shifting some spending over there, so it is also cool to see some of the more emerging platforms coming out.
Sure,
and
I
podcasts.
Guess the other thing that relates to kind of what you said about social becoming more expensive was what Krystina was talking about on the main stage yesterday about physical retail actually starts to seem economically viable as a marketing channel for some startups once they kind of hit the peak of diminishing returns for their social spending. And so I think that's one thing that's driving that phenomenon.
Yep. Yeah, it's something that Zach Normandin, I don't think he said it here, but he has said in the past that was one of the decisions behind them going into physical retail.
Yep. Okay, and we're gonna move in now to a redefining of the shopping experience. I love the Jetsons, even though it's not a grocery store. So when we talk about the shopping experience, removal of friction is something everybody talked about. Everybody's for removal of friction. And I feel like there's I had my own kind of epiphany when actually Joe and I went to an Amazon Go store. It's the first one that I had gone to, which reminded me a lot of the epiphany I had the first time I held an iPhone, where I kind of been and everybody's talking about it, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, okay, you sort of understand, you internalize what it is, and the Amazon Go store does make you realize how much friction there is at checkout. And I think we're seeing people really kind of sort of look at the assumptions, the calcified assumptions that they have, not just at checkout, but throughout the shopping experience.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you, but I think that is interesting. I obviously spoke about that yesterday, so I think cashierless checkout is a really interesting concept, but I'm actually more interested in the removal of friction from e-commerce, because I think it's sort of the reverse of what we're seeing in traditional retail, right, where it's so easy to just add a dress to your cart, skip a trip to the department store, whereas in grocery, it's a completely different ballgame, right? It's almost harder to be building your cart from home, so that's an area where I think there's just a ton of opportunity, even more so than physical.
I feel like any number of folks in kind of grocery e-commerce, kind of the people building platforms or conversational solutions for that, they're all about it's about the first trip, right? I think you actually talked about that at Groceryshop last year in a slightly different role, right? It's what's in the basket on the first trip, because it's so easy to reorder stuff you've already ordered as opposed to kind of putting that first order together. That's kind of what gets consumers over the hump of ordering more groceries online.
And I also, as a millennial, I'm the lone millennial up here, but when I hear the argument about people going in and picking their produce, I have absolutely no idea how to pick produce, just for the record, for everyone in the audience. And I'm sure I'm not the only millennial that has absolutely no idea to do that.
Did your high school not have that class?
We did not have that class, no.
With the removal of home economics from the core curriculum. So there's another thing that's really kind of struck me, and it's a concept that's kind of been bubbling. I've been seeing it. I remember going to e-commerce conferences back in 2000, and personalization. It was all about personalization, and there was such a focus on personalization because we were working with the assumption that it was all about having everything. And if you have everything, then finding the right things for people are important. But here I'm hearing more and more about curation. And I think that there are a lot of folks that are starting to realize that that they're probably not going to win the "we want to have everything" battle, and they're starting to understand that it's a lot more convenient for me to shop from a sweater shop or an apparel or for a retailer that may just have a few options for me. Costco is the perfect example of a curated assortment, and there's value from that curated assortment.
I think, though, that the point of Costco is a little bit different because obviously it's sort of like what Chandra from Sam's Club was saying. You know, they're making these big bets. You want to make sure your consumer really likes the product if they're going to be buying a big pack size. But I have to tell you, you know, living in New York, I know which convenience stores carry. I'm very big into finding emerging beverages. It's not just Halo Top ice cream that I like, but I know which stores carry Bai. I know which stores carry Core, which is another, you know, and so I feel like that element of discovery is also very important. I guess you could argue that's somewhat curation as well, knowing that they need to sort of have those up and coming brands. But I just worry about things getting too curated because I think people really are looking for that moment of discovery more than they have been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing I was going to kind of come back to the conversation I had with Stu Landsberg yesterday, and that's sort of one thing that Grove really tries to do is kind of this confused kind of new to better for the planet kind of household goods consumer kind of really comes to trust Grove. Like if Grove has this product in their assortment, it's got to be great. I don't have to worry about like reading the label or what. And so I think for retailers that kind of position themselves around a particular solution, it doesn't have to be better for the planet. Household goods, I think curation is important. For supermarkets, you know, for the folks that have always been kind of very broad in their assortments, I mean, maybe it's endless aisle kind of helps. You kind of have a smaller assortment in store, but you're able to fulfill some of the kind of nichier kind of long tail items through e-com.
It's dangerous though, because I will say, you know, I also love cold brew coffee. I'm giving a lot of plugs to a lot of products in here today, but no. So I'm a regular, you know, shopper. I feel like the only reason I go to a grocery store, to be quite honest, is to pick up my pack of cold brew. And you know, I went to the store a couple days ago, and you know, they were out of the brand that I typically buy, and I was like, well, you know, I really want cold brew. I don't want to be, you know, going to Starbucks every day and purchasing it. And so I tried a new brand, right? And I really like it. I like it more than what I was drinking before. So I think there's also a risk, right? When you don't have that product in the right point where consumers want it.
Right. Although it's risk for retailer versus risk for brand. The retailer still made a sale. You're a happy customer.
Risk for the brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Yep.
A couple other quick points. One concept that I heard here that I haven't heard before: aspirational personalization. So it's kind of taking the idea of personalization, but
don't show me what I want. Show me what I want to want,
or what I should. Right. So so I would say that my diet generally, I'm probably right for the aspirational personalization opportunity on that
Jello
front.
cheesecake.
The Cassars are a family of skinny fat men, lots about click and carry, reductions of friction in click and carry. I remember when click and carry used to mean at Walmart going to the back of the store, going to where the layaway desk used to be. And having to wait while people figured out how to work the system. Now it's dramatically easier. Interesting, I heard a couple of different people talking about trying to bring impulse opportunities to the click and carry point. And so obviously if you're a candy manufacturer, you're concerned about the fact that you don't have those trips where people are going through the candy aisle where your kid is forcing you to buy candy, but they're trying to find new ways to do that. But it also opens up a lot of new opportunities. It doesn't necessarily have to be small shelf stable. If you're looking to reward people and do some of the things that we've traditionally tried to do with the auto replenishment subscription. I've heard mixed signals on that. I saw some stats that were positive and bullish about it. Certainly, we've moved towards the idea of subscriptions in our media consumption. I think we have bears and bulls on how that is working out and whether we might have reached peak subscription or not when it comes to products. 63% of global consumers said that they would allow home sensors to automatically replenish groceries. That I think may be evidence of the fact that if you construct a survey the right way, you can get people to agree to anything. So I think I'm a little bit dubious on that.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of depends on the thing, right? And kind of how much you need it and how much you fear running out of it. You know, I mean, my contact lenses come every couple of months, and that's a very particular product, right? But subscription is maybe the right thing for something like that because I don't have to worry about it. But I think you're right that in general, I mean, it depends on the product and the individual consumer. There's no way to kind of say everybody's going to be buying stuff by a subscription in 2 years.
Yeah, I think Chewy is a great example of that.
Pet food, yep,
pet food it's hugely helpful as a dog owner. They're keeping her alive. But also razors, I think are.
All right. Okay, so mic runners, on your toes. Folks in the audience, what interesting things have you heard that you hadn't heard before? What themes were kind of clicking together for you guys that we haven't highlighted? And I'm okay with uncomfortable silence.
You can also disagree with us.
Oh,
There's someone over there.
Oh, sure. Hi, good morning. When I was in a table talk around AI, and it was very clear that AI is a fun, exciting word, and yet understanding how AI exactly applies to CPG and how it can drive efficiencies is still a big unknown. So to me, that conversation was really interesting and eye-opening in realizing that I think we're trying to pull the cart before the horse versus actually letting the right information drive us.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone want to build on that? The AI is one of those things we all talk about, and you know, I heard people say that AI is like what a company that used to call itself a software company today is now an AI company. But did anyone have any big epiphanies around? Oh, now I get why this is relevant in a way that they hadn't before around AI.
I mean, I think the thing about AI, to your point, is that it comes up in so many different parts of the supply chain and just the value chain and the business. And I think, you know, kind of thinking about it from a CPG perspective, I'm guessing it's primarily around kind of understanding customers better, kind of managing kind of all of the vast number of different data sets that you have about customers and prospective customers. And there, I think it's a point that Zia made in the Zeitgeist presentation that's super important, that we're only just beginning to realize that when you use machine learning for that, it's kind of a black box. You know the recommendations that come out of it, but you have no idea exactly why, and you need to be very careful about the kinds of biases that you may not even be aware of that kind of the black box is coming up with. So I think yeah, there's a lot of like careful testing before actually going commercial with any sort of solution like that.
Yep. What else?
Right here.
One theme that we haven't talked about in here, and then one, or in the conference, and then one that I noticed. First one I noticed was private label brands, and it's something that kind of pops up in waves. There was I guess quite a bit of coverage as Amazon was recommending products as sponsored listings. That got quite a bit of coverage and popped up, but seeing retailers really go deeper on how important that is for their companies. One, in just the number of products that they have and the expansion that we're seeing. But it's no longer just a cheaper alternative with a pretty no frills label. They're putting a lot of design and creative resources on making that a memorable brand and something that can really stand side by side. I was, I don't know, not shocked, but just interesting to see how much of the Target keynote, how much they expanded on that piece. So that was one that stood out to me that we haven't talked here. And then one that I didn't notice come up in any of the talks was, and it reminded me when you were saying you went to go pick up your cold brew coffee, it was out, you saw an alternative, you picked it, and that was it. There's a lot of focus on demand creation, of driving online traffic or paid traffic to users to go find a new product on a like order online, pick up in store. But out of stocks is a huge issue for that, because you're no longer dealing with 4 or 6 kind of distribution centers from an e-com standpoint. Something like a Walmart, you have, at the end of this year, 3,000 different distribution centers. The store is the source of the inventory, and so you see a lot of brands pay a lot of money to drive traffic to it, but the user arrives at that item page or at that shelf, and the product that they feature, they capture the user's attention, they're going there to consider purchasing it, it's out of stock. And it seems like a much bigger issue that both brands and retailers maybe haven't discovered yet, or at least aren't talking about.
Yeah, and that has always been the Achilles heel of any click and carry, ship from store kind of challenge. Retailers have notoriously poor ideas of what's in stock. And that is one of the I remember as a kid working at Jordan Marsh doing inventory during December when I was home on college break. And so inventory used to be episodic, but now with the robots that we've seen that are taking inventories, we have drones taking inventory. I'm optimistic that we're going to have better views on in-store inventory, which is going to make a lot of this stuff work better. On private label, yeah. That was a bullet point.
That was very well said.
Yeah.
Yes, ditto.
Yeah. That was a bullet point that I kind of glossed over just in thinking about time. But someone made the comment. It'll be interesting to see what happens to private label when the next recession rolls around, and private label penetration. Because private label is at such a higher level of quality now than it was when we went into the last recession, and as I was listening to the Target keynote and talking about all the focus on private label, I was thinking, if I were one of the brands here, I would be kind of freaked out right now.
And to that point, my conversation with Chandra Holt from Sam's Club, we were talking about how the merchandising and marketing of private label has shifted. She used to be in more of a traditional role there. Now she's in the .com side, and she was, basically talking about, you want the attractive product pages, the types of things you would expect her to say. But then she mentioned search, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So are people actually searching for Members Mark? And she said that they, in fact, are. So that is something I think branded companies should be thinking about.
Yeah, I think there's a couple more things there. I think it's really interesting that Target is kind of going the Costco route, right? Kirkland is sort of maybe the first private brand that really kind of people kind of were aware of as a brand, not just as a store brand. And I think it's interesting that Target is kind of opting to roll Archer Farms and a bunch of other kind of existing private labels they have into one brand versus going a multi-brand route. You look at Kroger. Kroger's Our Brands is like a whole portfolio of different brands, including like the organic one and the value one and whatnot. And I think either strategy could be valid, but I think the diverse strategy maybe gives a retailer more options. The other thing that I think is interesting, again, this is a little director's cut of my conversation with Stu. One of the things we didn't talk about is I was all set to ask him about private label brands, and he got a little touchy about that phrase. He was like, we don't think of them as private label because we have our own in-house research team and in-house manufacturing team. So he thinks of them as our brands, not private label. In his mind, private label is something that you kind of create the brand, but you outsource all of the other parts of the supply chain to somebody else. And he distinguishes that. I don't know if consumers do yet, but they might, and that might be something to think about. Is a private label like truly in-house in terms of you're making it, or a private label where you've built the brand, but someone else does the product creation?
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Should we?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So building on that, I think we all have that concept of private label and how we have now lived brands and private label in stores. I think one topic that it's really coming together now in home, and disintermediation of brands through new technologies like voice, like not being now having cracked what will be the right balance. And as we are evolving in new technologies, Amazon imposing brands despite what you are ordering.
Yeah.
I think this is a big topic maybe to keep looking forward. How can we keep that power of brands, of what learnings we've had in the grocery aisle, now transforming in the decision making in brands at home, and how the new technologies are having a big effect in driving that, and how now visual recognition on top of voice might be helping also an opportunity for brands to have that more of a say of completing that purchase.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised. There were a couple of things that I didn't hear as much about this year that I've heard about in years past. And I heard less about voice ordering this year than I think I did last year.
Pulse Labs, though, on the disruptive tech track, that's who I was going to point you to. They're a really interesting company. They actually were part of the original Alexa fund over at Amazon. They also have an investment from Google. So they've got some good backers. But basically what they do is sort of like a UX testing for brands or retailers who are looking to develop their own voice capabilities. So they have a lot of rich research on the types of things that consumers want to use the devices for, what the different platforms are. Because I think so often we think of just, the Google Home when it's voice, but no, it's also when you're on your phone, it's also when you're in your car. So I would encourage you probably to take a look at them. I'm sure there's other companies out there doing other things that are similar, but there are definitely companies that are looking to help you guys answer those questions.
Yes.
Thank you. One of the areas which to me is kind of interesting, everybody's talking about the commercialization, e-commerce, data, AI, all of that. When we're looking at brand owners, particularly also from a D2C perspective, from a supply chain end-to-end integration, today the brand owners very simply are not set up to step up to the plate and scale the D2C models. You're talking about subscriptions. Very often the end-to-end integration, or basically in all cases, will be the essential bit to really make e-commerce a profitable business model, which you can also scale and eventually make sustainably interesting. So I think while there's huge opportunities from also an environmental perspective in going direct and bypassing some of the retail steps which there are out there today, fact is that it will be extremely important to look at how am I going to fulfill this possibility. Squeezing it through the existing platforms is very simply not realistic.
Yeah. The digitally native brands, with CPG digitally native brands, Henry and I did an in-depth analysis of 50 of the more prominent ones. 50% of them now have moved into hybrid wholesale DTC models. I believe that with CPG brands, and this will be different from non-CPG. We'll dig into non-CPG at Shop Talk. I believe that wholesale expansion is going to be the way that they're going to most effectively and profitably scale. The trick is going to be maintaining a core as a DTC brand where you can maintain that connection, you can iterate, and you could really understand your customer, even when wholesale represents 90% of your business. Like one thing I'm going to be really curious about are the Harry's founders at Edgewell. Running U.S. brands, I just wonder how well their magic is going to work when they're working on brands where they don't have those direct connections. It's going to be interesting to see whether they're as effective as they were in the direct-to-consumer environment. Other thoughts? What did we miss?
Here's one more over here.
Yes.
Hi there. I am switching topics here a little bit, but I heard a presentation from, I believe it was called Nova Store, and it kind of addressed the grocery store of the future.
Yep.
But other than them, I didn't hear much discussion on the physical changes to the future footprints and layouts of grocery stores. Did you hear any discussions on that topic?
Yeah, so you must not have been here on Sunday. No. We had a couple of conversations on that on Sunday. We had the president of U.S. from Unibel, Rodamco Westfield, which is a European shopping center owner. They acquired Westfield, which was a California-based shopping center owner. So some of the things that he was talking about was basically the convergence of grocery into lifestyle centers, which is a model that obviously has been predominantly done over in Europe, which they're starting to see become more attractive over here as the U.S. starts to mimic mimic some of their behaviors. We also heard from Target and Kroger about some of the changes that they're making to their stores. Kroger, of course, having the partnership with Walgreens, which is really interesting. I'm cognizant of time. And Target was talking a lot about how they're really doubling down on the urban formats. But I think what's also really interesting about Target is how they are not neglecting their traditional stores. I think there are some companies in other areas of retail where, they're really bullish on certain stores and they pour a bunch of money into those and then they just sort of let the rest of the fleet get neglected. And I think what Target has been really effective at doing is identifying, yes, we need to have smaller stores, we need to penetrate urban markets, we need to get closer to college students so they build this brand affinity early on. But we absolutely need to make sure our larger stores are a place where consumers can come and they can come through the entrance where there's grab and go, or if they want to, have the whole Target experience where they're there for hours and hours, they can come through the other entrance, which is more designed for discovery. So I think to your point, it's something we would love to go deeper into in future shows.
Yeah, and I guess the one other thing I'd add quickly there is in the 360 experience, the robotics story that we were telling in the Dome and the VR, the Sedano's example with Takeoff Technology is like that is an actual, it's a small case study, but it's an actual store, but they took over what used to be the deli, right? It used to be actually part of the physical footprint of the store, got turned into a micro fulfillment center to do their local e-commerce deliveries. They reconfigured the rest of the store to be just a little bit smaller, but I think that's another example of a potential future change, is fulfillment kind of taking up part of the existing footprint. The rest of the store gets a little smaller and more efficient.
Definitely. Yeah, the store as distribution point, and then how it needs to change, where it is, how it's laid out, I think is a really, really interesting up-and-coming story. Target, I believe, is now, I can't remember if it's 100% or 80% of Target's orders are fulfilled from stores now. Interestingly, though, it's not the store near you, probably. They have certain stores that they're shipping out of, but you have to expect that it's going to move toward the stores from you, and that's going to be a really significant change. So with that, excuse me, we are out of time, as they say in the biz. So I just want to thank you all for coming. We'll be here definitely, we really, really do value feedback on what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see more of, less of. Yeah. And so whether you catch up with us now or you follow up with us after, please do. It's really, really important to us.
We're literally already thinking about the agenda for next year. We want to make it even better for you all and hope to see you then. Thanks.
Thank you.